it's actually 10 minutes after noon, so we'll say good afternoon. Thank you for being here. This is such a wonderful crowd, and it's such a large crowd. I'm really, really impressed. I'd like to, first of all, thank the World Affairs Council for inviting me here today. David and Lynn, who I've been in touch with, as well as Cooper for sponsoring this event. So, and all of you for coming here. It's certainly an interesting time right now. I have those are in the headlines for some time. Okay. So North Korea has been in the news for some time, and the latest is a headline from today, and that is the 3 Americans that are held in North Korea. Now they're on their way. They're outside of North Korea, on their way home. I actually heard of the release of those 3 Americans several days ago, but when they used the term release, I checked to make sure that they were not in North Korea, because entire North Korea is a prison. So, and it turned out that they really haven't left North Korea then. They were released to a hotel in Pyongyang, which is a huge improvement, but until they're out of North Korea, they're not really safe. So I was really glad to hear that they're out. Because I'm talking about a country, I always like to put a map up there, and we see that Korean Peninsula is surrounded by some major powers: China, Japan, and Russia. And so whenever we talk about issues in that on the Korean Peninsula, we really cannot ignore the national interest of the surrounding powers, and that also includes the United States as a Pacific power. And of course, we have alliance with 2 of those countries, South Korea and Japan, and have troops stationed over there. Let me navigate. Okay. I'm going to start from what's on your mind, I believe, because we just had a summit between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and these are some of the items that came out of the Panmunjom Declaration, the agreement that they signed. This is not a complete list, but I'm just going to talk about each one of them, and then I'll talk about some of the other issues. So the first one, well, the real question is, will North Korea denuclearize? That's our question, and that's what we're trying to do. And instead of answering the question, I am going to talk about some other, so that give you some background in answering this question. So, when we say denuclearization, we are talking about all of North Korea. But in the Panmunjom Declaration, it says denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And in the prior to the signing of the Panmunjom Declaration, the South Korean envoys who visited North Korea, and they came to the U.S. and briefed President Trump. They also used the term denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Kim Jong-un, during the summit, never uttered the word denuclearization. Only South Korean president said denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, again, 4 times. So what does it mean? There's a hidden meaning here. And this is a term that North Korea has used since the 80s. And of course, we know that North Korea since the 80s, and even prior to that, have developed nuclear weapons. So what North Korea means by Korean Peninsula, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, it means South Korea. Well, we know that South Korea doesn't have nuclear weapons. So what they're really talking about is the nuclear umbrella of the United States, which comes with the alliance. And it's they're not only looking at the nuclear capability, but also U.S. military capability. So what that means is U.S. troops off the peninsula and ending the alliance. So I know that there was a big headline about how North Korea, Kim Jong-un, did not demand the withdrawal of U.S. forces from South Korea. Well, he doesn't have to, because it's said in so many other ways. And this is one of the ways that North Korea says U.S. troop withdrawal and then ending the alliance. So, but let me add to that a little bit. So, North Korea means no nuclear umbrella, but he said nuclear capability in general. So he's talking about nuclear capabilities of other countries around the region. And as you saw on the map, the first map, China and Russia, they have nuclear weapons. So what Kim Jong-un means is denuclearization of United States, of China, of Russia. So when is that going to happen? Yeah. And then after that, maybe they'll think about dismantling theirs. So again, that's the same thing as a no. So I don't think we should be fooled by the word denuclearization. We can't get too excited about that because what's important is the words that follow that term. He also talked about peace agreement. They said they'll end the armistice, which is ceasefire from the Korean War, and sign a peace agreement. So they didn't say who, but they did put a timeline. They said by the end of this year. Several different, I just want to talk about the implication of what that means. First of all, when you are talking about peace agreement, there's an assumption that the threat has disappeared. And North Korean threat has not disappeared. We know that North Korea has fourth largest military in the world. Their military it ranks higher than Russian military, so it's quite significant. It deploys about 7% of its military into the near DMZ area. Of course, you heard about thousands of artillery, right? You heard thousands of artillery along the DMZ. Well, yeah, they have that. And while the summit between President Moon and Kim, while that was occurring, North Korea was busy cyber hacking other countries, financial industries, entertainment industries, defense industries. So, that threat hasn't gone away. In fact, that'll likely increase the cyber attacks. Let's see. North Korea has the world's largest special forces, and their job, their mission, is to penetrate in the military term, we call that the rear. So rear is the southern part of South Korea, and wreak havoc there. Because if North Korea attacks South Korea again, and what's important is not just the troops that are on the Korean Peninsula, but all the reinforcement that will come from the United States and elsewhere, from the UN sending states and elsewhere. So what they do is they go to the Japan first. Japan has all these bases, so they go there first, and then they go to the southern part of Korea, South Korea first, and then work their way up. So what their special officer are trying to do is to prevent that. So again, very, very important. Their United Front Department, their main role is to create pro-North Korea groups in South Korea, and they have been doing this for a long, long time. So they're really focused on subversion, and that's a significant problem in South Korea. But also to create pro-North Korea groups in the United States and elsewhere. So, when we talk about threats, of course, there's chemical, biological, and of course, nuclear weapons. But let's go back to a peace agreement. So, there are questions as to who is to sign the peace agreement. And because of this signing of the peace agreement came out of the meeting between North Korean leader and South Korean leader, one may assume that those two will do the signing. But they never mentioned who will do the signing. And North Korea has never meant it to be South Korea because they don't recognize South Korea as government. So they have always said that they want to sign this peace agreement with the United States. So why do they want to do that? Well, our mission I worked in U.S. versus Korea, and our mission is to deter. First mission is to deter North Korea from attacking again, as they did in 1950 during the Korean War. But in addition to that, if North Korea does attack, then our mission is to defend South Korea and to defeat North Korea. Well, if you're a threat, if you no longer consider North Korea as a threat by signing the peace agreement, then there's no reason for U.S. presence on the Korean Peninsula. So again, that's another way of saying U.S. forces withdraw from South Korea. And I am definitely not against peace agreement, but if the threats haven't disappeared, I don't know what good signing peace agreement will be. And also, South Korea was a belligerent in the Korean War. So if you leave out this party, then what kind of peace is that? So again, it raises a lot of questions. And so again, we can't really be focused only on the word peace. We have to look at the rest of it. We have to look at, break that down. And then the armistice. So armistice is a ceasefire, which occurred in 1953. And basically, it stopped all the shooting part of the war. So technically, Korea is still at war. It's just that there's no shooting. So it's for everyday living, it's like peace. It's absence of war. But what ending the armistice does is, it'd be essentially signing a piece of paper again. There's the United Nations Command responded during the Korean War, again led by the United States, and they created something called UN Command Military Armistice Commission. And the mission of the UNC-MAC is to supervise the armistice. So anything that happens along the DMZ, anything that goes back and forth between North Korea and South Korea, or anything like that, they supervise. And there's also another organization called Neutral Nations Supervisory NNSC Committee, so NNSC. And again, because it's neutral nation, so in South Korea, on the side, or the South Korean side, there's Sweden and Switzerland. And on the North Korean side, they used to have representatives from Poland and the Czech Republic and China. That's no longer the case. They kicked them out. North Korea kicked them out. But NNSC still exists, and they do certain investigations of certain matters along the DMZ. So if you sign the, or if armistice is ended, well, their role ends. But we know, several months ago, we know about the North Korean soldier who defected across the DMZ, and he was shot at. Okay, that made the news. Something like that, we may never know without the presence of the UNC-MAC or the NNSC. So I just want to, again, point out some of the ramifications of what these do. The Hostile Act, Land, Sea, and Air, how that will stop. That's also in the Panmunjom Declaration. And as soon as I saw land, sea, and air, in the military we use that all the time. Land, ground forces, sea, Navy, Air Force. Of course, Marines across the whole, structure. Because Marines have their own Air Force, own, infantry, own. So what that means is military. Well, first thing that came to my mind was military exercises, combined military exercise between the United States and South Korea. So we just wrapped up this exercise, and how that always makes an issue. We have this exercise every year, and North Korea always makes an issue out of this. It's a hostile act. Well, I'd like to point out several different things here. North Korea also conducts annual exercises, military exercises, but that never makes the news. Only the news exercise that we do, that makes the news, because we want to be transparent. And ours is defensive in nature, whereas North Korean military exercises are offensive in nature, because that's their doctrine, their mission, that's what they're designed around. So on May 1st, which is about a week ago, Kim Jong-un visited this military unit, artillery unit, that is responsible for attacking West Sea area. And he said something, annihilate all South Chosun. South Chosun is South Korea, but North Korea calls South Korea South Chosun. It calls it itself Chosun. And he said that it was thrilling to watch the 5 islands. In the West Sea, there are 5 main islands, including the Yeongbyon Island, which was attacked by North Korean artillery in 2010. So, includes those islands. Military, and he also said, so including those 5 islands, the cities, so cities around there include Seoul, military targets, and reactionary enemy organizations, all destroyed in the sea of fire. Again, this never made the news in the U.S., but this is what the KCNA, North Korea's official mouthpiece, said in North Korea. So what this shows is that not only that North Korea also conducts exercises, but when we talk about intentions, when we do these negotiations, again, we see all these positive words like denuclearization and peace, but we don't really see what else is going on at the same time, which would help us understand the intent and the situation. Okay, so in order to understand South or North Korea's how significant the nuclear weapons are to North Korea, we really need to understand their goals and priorities and how the system really works. So I thought I'd spend some time talking about that, but to talk about that, I need to talk about the history a little bit. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but the most important thing here that I want to point out is the first bullet, which is about Dangun. Dangun is a mythical first king of Koreans. And I could talk to you about the rest of the mythology, but to save some time, I'll just point out the fact that he is the first king of Go-Joseon. Go means ancient. Joseon is one of the ancient kingdoms. But that's the first Korean kingdom. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because later on, when we talk about North Korean Kim, Kim Jong-un now, and then Kim Jong-il, his father, and then Kim Il-sung, his grandfather, they have developed this succession system based on royalty, which is, so they're trying to link this, they're trying to get legitimacy by linking their bloodline to this, to Dangun. And Dangun's his grandfather was Lord of Heaven, and his father wanted to live on earth, so his father descended to earth, but he descended to Mount Baekdu. Baekdu is highest mountain in Korea, in both South Korea, and it straddles the border of North Korea, current North Korea, and China. But this Mount Baekdu has this mythological, symbolic symbolism to it. And this is relatively more recent history, except for the first 2. But the Goryeo dynasty is where the word Korea comes from. Korea is derived from Goryeo dynasty, and the Goryeo dynasty is derived from Goguryeo dynasty. It was in the previous slide, but it just shows that the term. And then after the Goryeo dynasty, it was Joseon dynasty. And North Korea, as I mentioned earlier, they call themselves Joseon still. So they call themselves Joseon, they call South Korea Nam Joseon, Nam is South, which means they don't call, South Korea calls itself Hanguk, so very different. And then South Korea calls North Korea Bukhan, which means North Han. And so what that says is that North Korea does not recognize the government of South Korea. South Korean government does not recognize the government of North Korea. They both claim the entire peninsula under their rule. and it has always been. Kim Il-sung, when he started the Korean War, that was his intent. He wanted to unify. He wanted to unify Korea under. He wanted to unify Korea under his own rule, his own system, and South Korea did the same. Again, that's enshrined in the Constitution. But the United Nations, which supervised the election in 1948 that created the Republic of Korea, they actually recognized the government that was under the UN supervision, that to be the legitimate government over the entire Korean Peninsula. So it has that background to it. And this is a little side note, but there are defectors from North Korea, escapees from North Korea. They usually go to China because China is easier to get to. And I mean, it's not easy. A lot of people have, been killed crossing the river. But after that, someone eventually make it to South Korea after all kinds of arduous, journey. And when they arrive in South Korea, they're granted South Korean citizenship automatically because of the constitution that recognized the entire Korean Peninsula as, as Republic of Korea. Okay, so in 1948, well, I should mention that, Korea was Japan's colony, and it gained independence when the U.S., or when Imperial Japan surrendered to the United States during World War II. So that's when Korea gained its independence, and the Soviet Union placed Kim Il-sung as the head of North Korea. And in the South Korea, it was Syngman Rhee, who was anti-communist, pro-US, pro-capitalist, and he set South Korea on that path. And then in North Korea, Soviet Union basically created another satellite state, which reflects its system. And North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, and I think you were in the Korean War. There may be some others that were in the Korean War in this crowd. By the way, thank you for your service and sacrifice, which allowed the current South Korea to have freedom that they enjoy. So that was a brief background on the Korean Peninsula, and now I want to focus on the priorities of the Kim regime, the Kim family regime. And I'm also going to talk about some of the fears that the Kim family has. So the top priority of North Korea, or the Kim family regime, is not about the people. It's about the survival of Kim Jong-un and survival of his regime, the Kim regime. Those two are the top priorities. No matter what the name said, name of the country, it's a Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Make it sound like, people are there twice. Democratic, that's about the people. People's, that's about the people too. But that's not what the system is about. The system is about the leader. So it's in a very precarious situation, the regime, is because it doesn't have what's very, very important in modern day, which is peaceful transition of power. So we elect leaders, we go to the vote ballots and we vote, and we elect leaders that way, and we have transfer of power from one person to another without bloodshed. And March 4th, 1797, I put that date up there because that's when John Adams, our second president, the power transferred over from George Washington to John Adams peacefully. And that's the first time in political history where transfer occurred peacefully from one common citizen to another common citizen. And it's something that we take for granted. We just assume that that's how it is. But that's relatively new concept. But this is a concept that does not exist in North Korea. So if you're a dictator, a totalitarian dictator, you are going to constantly worry about being overthrown because that's the only way you're going to leave that position, or natural death. But if you are in a system where you're constantly suppressing people when it's not desired, then one will be afraid of a revolution from below, mass dissatisfaction, and them wanting change. That's one concern. And the other concern is coup d'etat by the elites. So that's what he constantly fears. And in the externally, I put the very existence of South Korea as a threat to North Korea, to the regime, because it's much more successful system. It gives people the freedom. It gives people a market economy so that they have prosperity. So it's a successful system right across the border. And if people knew about it, that would be the system that they would prefer, which is why they control the information very, very strictly, because they don't want people to know the truth. They don't want outside information coming in, corrupting people's mind, and thinking that they want something that they don't have. So given those fears and his priorities, that sort of drives his behavior, including the nuclear weapons. I want to briefly talk about the legitimacy, because no matter what kind of dictator you are, you have to have some level of legitimacy. And in, if you look at social contract theory, there's a contract between the governed and the government. So people give up some of their freedom. In return, they receive, in return, government provides certain level of security and certain basic goods. That is not something that the Kim family regime can do. You heard of the mass starvation in the mid-1990s, and even now you constantly hear of malnutrition and shortage of food, and of course lack of freedom, utter lack of freedom, and abuses of human rights. So when the system is set up that way, he needs some other factors that's going to sort of prop up, give him legitimacy. So one is that Baekdu bloodline, the Baekdu mountain that I mentioned earlier, that goes back to Dangun. Well, this really wasn't an issue during his grandfather days, Kim Il-sung. His legitimacy is derived from some of anti-Japanese activities, during the colonial period for independence. So he has that legitimacy, but Kim Jong-un doesn't. So what came around recently is that he wants to link back to his grandfather. And how do you do that? You do that through bloodline. So they are talking about the Baekdu bloodline more and more, and to the point where they put that into the constitution of North Korea. And that helps this legitimacy of this generational succession. And the other is ideology. You want to constantly tell people that they live on paradise on earth, and for the longest time, for decades, people believed it, because there's no other information that competes with that. They had, they have radios. It's illegal to own tunable radios because you're not supposed to listen to any other stations other than what the government tells you. So, but this situation is changing. More and more information is going in terms of, especially South Korea, because it's the same language. South Korean dramas and South Korean music, K-pop. It's actually very popular throughout Asia. And it's very entertaining. I watch some of these K-dramas, and I'm watching for days sometimes, and it's very addictive. It's very entertaining. So North Koreans risk their lives watching these, because if they're caught, they can be, that's it for them, or they can be sent to a gulag. So, and again, through that, more and more information is going in. And then the other is nuclear weapons, because let me go to the next slide. Nuclear weapons provide certain level of legitimacy because, first of all, it gives people a sense of pride, because it's not easy. This is rocket science. This is, this is very significant, scientific and technological achievement. So it gives people a sense of pride. it has something that all the major powers have, like China, Russia, United States. South Korea doesn't have nuclear weapons. So vis-a-vis South Korea, it finally has something that it wins in a way. So, you know, in terms of having something that all the great powers have, that's one of the goals of Kim Jong-un when he meets or if he meets President Trump. In fact, he told his own people through, again, the official mouthpiece, that soon we will be recognized as a nuclear power. So that's one of his goals. He didn't say soon we will denuclearize. He said soon we'll be recognized. And so, so what he wants to do is talk about nuclear arms control. Because who talks about nuclear arms control? The people already have, you know, those powers. So he wants to be recognized. And again, you know, it just boosts his legitimacy, his ideology, his legitimacy because of that. Of course, it also, you know, we are very concerned about proliferation of North Korea's nuclear weapons, you know, missiles, bombs, technology, as well as chemical and biological weapons as well. And it gets, I mean, I would say one of the most important things is it gets them hard currency, which they're always seeking. But that's not good news for us because they can sell it to terrorists who would not hesitate to use it against us. And we know that he also sold chemical weapons to Syria, which was used recently. And then conventional weapons. Conventional weapons are expensive, and you know, we talked about their artillery. I mean, they do have a lot of weapons, but they're many of them are old, and it costs a lot of money to update conventional weapons. I'm just going to do a quick time check. Let's see. This is where I want to focus on South Korea. It can be used as a coercive weapon regarding its goal of the Korean Peninsula, which is to dominate the entire Korean Peninsula under its rule. And it can use it to coerce not only South Korea but also the United States. And that's another intention of that. And also negotiate a peace treaty. I actually created this slide, you know, a while back, and now they're talking about the peace treaty. But again, that has always been North Korea's goal. They talked about creating a peace treaty for quite some time. But again, the real intent behind that is to break the alliance and take the U.S. forces off Korea. I'm going to go through some of this very quickly, but you know, we have cult of personality. Again, that's all about legitimacy, but they really use their mass media, their monopoly of all the information to prop up this cult of personality in order to bolster legitimacy, to keep people loyal to the system. There actually was a report called Songbun, it's about Songbun, that was produced a few years ago. And basically, Songbun is a status, it's a classification system. It's a officially sanctioned discrimination system. And they do this to keep people under control. So the people who were previously landlords or teachers or priests, they are now the undesired class, the lowest class, which is a hostile class, and they don't get you know, priority when it comes to food or medical care or housing or anything like that. Those are reserved for the elites, for the core class. So they're core, wavering, and hostile. So the core helps them basically support the system. And among that, the smaller portion of that, you know, when I say elites, I'm usually referring to a smaller percentage that within the core system. But again, very, this is one of the ways that they, you know, they systematize the method in which they violate human rights of everyone, including some of the elites. Elites are not, you know, immune to this because, you know, you heard what happened to his uncle. You know, he was purged and he's gone now. And so nobody is immune. Nobody's immune. Okay. And I talked about this already, so I'm going to skip this. I'm going to talk about this very briefly. Basically, they control people at every level of the society. And these are three main security apparatus. One is not enough, so they have three. And basically, the first one, Ministry of Public Security, that's more like the police, but it also does intelligence and counterintelligence. So it keeps tab on people in general, especially the hostile class. And the second one, Ministry of State Security, they focus on the elites, the party officials and the military. So that is so the first one is to prevent mass revolution, which he's afraid of, and the other one is to prevent coup d'etat by the elites. And then military security command, they focus on the military, because military has monopoly, it has arms, right? So they're the, I guess, if for a totalitarian leader, the armed organization is the most feared because they can take over and coup d'etat. So they get extra scrutiny, but they all watch each other. So that helps prevent any one organization from becoming so powerful that it will challenge the leader. So this is why North Korea has not collapsed yet, because their fear system is extremely, well done, I guess. In addition to those security apparatus, also you have other ones, and the bottom three, like Inminban, that's local neighborhood, the youth league, all these are at the local level, your neighborhood level. So they all know each other, and then they watch each other. And so you have to be very careful what you say, because if you say the wrong thing, it could be taken away, which has happened quite a bit. So that's you can't even say what you don't have freedom of expression, you don't have freedom of speech.